Can I hold your hand?
Did you keep going? I have no idea what you're starting with. Keep
Well,
going.
can I hold your hand because you're fasting and you look like you need it?
Okay. I thought you were singing this song. Can you hear me now? That's what I sing all the time whenever the phone doesn't work with somebody. I've done that to you a few times.
You've done that to me.
It's the wrong lyric. I didn't realize it was the wrong lyric.
No. It's the great lyric.
Can you hear me now?
So, guys, Monday. It's Monday.
It's Monday? Oh, wow. It is Monday. This is. I've had 2 bottles. This is the juice week. This is the second bottle of my juice for the week.
And as you can see,
green. You won't see it because it's through the. It's the
advertising the Juice Brothers.
Yes, the Juice Brothers.
So today we are on with
Venus Lopez.
Venus Lopez, and Andy. Was it this morning or yesterday? He's like, I don't think there's going to be a good show for you, Bambos.
Yeah, because you always have like tangential reactions to any drugs from your own past.
Yeah. So I'm like, give me a chance to change, man.
Yeah, or puke on the show. Last time we did a show like this, you said you wanted a bucket because it brought you back to some pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, and I grounded it afterwards.
Oh yeah, beautiful. So we're gonna have I hold your hand when you're tripping with Venus Lopez
on
a
wonderful
chaos. So Venus Lopez comes from a mutual friend, and I have been working a lot in San Francisco over the last, say, 8 some odd years.
Yeah.
And what I noticed in San Francisco, more so than anywhere else I'd ever been in my life, was that they'd always be talking about psychedelics and how they were using psychedelics to improve their performance, to go through very emotionally difficult parts of their history. And at first, it's always like this weird thing how I notice how I integrate information. The first time 1 or 2 people talk about it, I think, oh, like that's, I can't take that all that seriously. And then you hear a few more people talk about it, and then you hear a few more, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is really something.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. Ayahuasca. I mean, 5 years ago, we weren't really talking about ayahuasca all that much, and now it's just so common practice for people to discuss it.
No, and they've been hearing about ayahuasca for 10 years.
Have
and
you?
You've just
caught on. Okay. Well, let's just put it this way. I just caught on. It's become mainstream when I've heard about it. Other than that, it's not mainstream.
You haven't done ayahuasca yet, right?
No. I don't want to puke. I mean, I have no interest in sitting over a bucket. And so like that, I mean, I puke,
I love that is the thing that you remember.
That's the only thing I'm thinking about. Like, I don't want to sit on a bucket.
Funny enough, your mentor, Case, did not puke.
He did not. Yeah. And I've always been curious because I didn't even know he'd done it, by the way, until he died. I didn't even know that because he was so against drugs. We talked about it for ages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He let's give some context. He did it during the course of his cancer.
Yeah. And I think towards the end of his life, he said, I'm going to try a few things that otherwise I wouldn't have tried. And he was again in San Francisco, and someone said, hey, you got to do this. And he did. And I didn't even talk to him about it afterwards. Amazing. I didn't even discuss it with him. Nice. I think if he told me he'd done it, I wouldn't have known what he was talking about anyways. So that was 5 years ago, or 6 now.
Yeah.
So the whole thing was that I, as I've gone through my own healing, I've also seen everyone takes their own journey. Everyone decides the practices that suit them, the things that connect to what they need at any given moment. And it's not my prerogative or anyone else's prerogative to decide for them what it is that they actually would like as an experience. And what I've seen is, and I call them these moments. And I do believe that they're these experiences, and they're peak experiences, which give us an opportunity to look at things another way. That is one avenue that is an incredible opportunity for people to work through trauma, stress, beliefs, who knows what, or just to see the world in a new light.
Yeah.
And I think as I've aged, and I've not had Case as a mentor, because remember, Case was always I talked about adamant about no drugs, no drugs, no drugs. And I've sort of slowly felt, wow, whatever gives you an experience that you can reshape your thinking and alter your brain chemistry in some ways. And I know you have had such a rough time with drugs in your life that when we've done similar shows in the past, it's been hard for you to distinguish where is it medicine for another person, and where do you, when like a drug is mentioned, you go to an experience inside of yourself where you feel what that felt like in your body when you had that drug.
Yeah, I overdosed on LSD. I took it every day for 2 months.
Every day.
For 2 months, and
Wow.
I couldn't come out of it.
And did you keep taking it?
I kept on taking it. I was also dealing back then, so I had like these sheets of paper that were dipped in liquid acid.
Okay.
And at some point, I couldn't differentiate the dreams from the reality.
Wow.
Yesterday from today, like there was no ground anymore.
And you did that for a month.
2.
Wow, 2 months.
Like I feel the blood coming into my heart right now.
Yeah.
So when we had Niels Elzinga,
Yeah.
and we talked about LSD, and that is what my body was reacting to it.
Yeah.
Like somehow it stays in your system in a very subtle way.
Yeah.
And having said that, since the last show, that show gave me the opportunity, because I felt sick for 2 days.
Wow.
And I found peace with it. Like coming onto this show today, I don't experience the judgment that I had in the last show.
Oh, wow.
And what you said so beautifully is, or actually what I'm getting to experience, also spending a lot of time with you, is seeing the love behind the intention behind the things people do.
Mm-hmm.
So where I would use the drugs to numb myself, this feels like using the drugs to find the love for yourself.
Wow.
If that makes sense. So saying that, I feel more spacious.
You took the drugs to go out of yourself. And what the suggestion is that we take them in these instances to look inside.
Yeah. And this is a new thing, right? In my generation, it was just abusing drugs.
Yeah. And what I find interesting, and this is where why I really wanted to get Venus on, was that I've often had this feeling like, and I did my one experience, which I've mentioned 100 times with this 5-MeO stuff. And what I noticed was that I needed a safe environment and a sense of security to go into it, because I didn't know what I was going into. I think one thing no one knows, before you go into a hallucinogen of a psychedelic, if you've never had that experience, you don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
So you actually have nothing to compare it. So you're really looking for a rock, so you can say, I can surrender not only to this substance, but I can surrender to the person who's going to hold my hand as I go into this experience. And for that reason, I thought it would be really fascinating to have Venus on.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll take it and let's say LSD.
Yeah.
You might take it and you don't even know that you are in the experience. That might be also.
Well, I think after 2 months of taking it, you don't know if you're in the experience. I think any other individual would know that they're in the experience, wouldn't they? You'd have to know.
I'm talking about people that do it for the first time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But we're going to let Venus Lopez
join us on the sofa.
There Hello. She is.
Hi, guys.
Hey. Thank you for coming on.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I thought it was so cool when we discussed, and you said, "Hey, Andy, you know, part of my life is just holding people's hands when they go through these experiences." Like I was like, "Hold on, that's like a sacred space." And in some ways, it's like you're going in to one of these experiences. That person may not have anything comparable that their entire life, and you're the one that's there for them at that moment.
It's so precious to be there for those moments for people when they're just exploring their own consciousness and they feel safe enough to be able to do that in my presence. And it feels like an honor and a privilege to do that for people. And I personally have done this work for over 10 years on my own psyche, in my own field, and learning to look at the world through new lenses as opposed to the ones that we've been programmed with or conditioned with.
Mm.
And so in my ability to do that for myself, I can now hold up a mirror for other people and create that space for them to plug into and know that whatever rabbit hole they go down, I can guide them back into the space. And that's really important. And I love what you said earlier, the difference between escaping your life and exploring your own consciousness and your ability to see how powerful you really are in these other dimensional spaces. Because it's all consciousness, right? And just being able to tune into different bandwidths. And these molecules allow us to do that. They allow us to step outside of our own frame and have a new idea, which is everything, right? Most of the time, people don't have new ideas unless somebody gives it to them.
Yeah. I mean, when I did the 5-MeO experience, the next day, I experienced everything differently.
Exactly.
And it hasn't shifted since. So there was a connection to the environment, to my surrounding, just feeling one. You know, there's the statement, I'm one with everything, which is a very mental statement. But then there's a feeling like, wow, I'm really one with everything. I'm looking at this tree and I don't see this sort of boundary that I had in my head the day earlier.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's what it does. I mean, first of all, 5-MeO is called the God molecule for a reason. It holds a particular vibration, right? And God is an experience. It's not an idea or a thought, but it's an experiential experience. And unless you have that experience, you really just don't have a reference point. The brain doesn't understand it. You can hold it in theory all you want, but until you actually are in that moment and totally embracing it, and allowing it to be, you know, your present moment, then you really have, the brain has now a little glimpse and an understanding of how miraculous we really are. Yeah. And it allows you to do that. And that vibration also has a lot of information in it, you know, so when you can tap into that bandwidth and experience yourself in the largest sense of the word, you know, as a God particle, so to speak, then you can come back and really understand how we're all connected. And there is no separation, literally, you know.
Yeah. It's weird though, because if you say it, you know, I heard people say that before I did it myself. Yeah. And I'm always like, oh, another loon. Oh God, another one, you know, another one. Yeah. Another one that went to Burning Man. If you tell me another story about Burning Man, I'm going to get sick. But in a way, you're like, wow, I hear the same words they use coming out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, in order for you to hold someone's hand, right? You've been doing this now for 10 years. Can you kind of give us an idea of what was your first time like holding someone's hand?
Yes.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Do you want a bucket?
Kiss before going to bed, right?
Oh yeah.
Andy's been giving me feedback not to go direct. First kiss and then.
Gambo's questions are always so direct at times. I'm like, Gamba, first you kiss and then you go to bed. Like, don't just.
I just want to celebrate this moment.
I know we celebrate. It's almost like we have like the meta level things going on between us, and then we actually have our interactions.
Totally.
Yes.
Well, I'll start with the first time I had my experience. I remember laying there and.
How old are you? How old are you at this time, by the way?
I was 38.
38. Had first experience.
My first experience.
How old are you now?
I'm 48 now.
Bam. Continue.
Yeah. So I remember I had been studying God pretty much my whole life, and I had this deep, deep love and passion for spirit, and I wanted to understand what this God thing was. And so I had studied physics and quantum mechanics and spirituality and self-help and all the different religions. And I came to the conclusion that everybody was basically speaking of the same thing, just in a different language, right? But then when I had my first experience, it was like, oh, this is the oneness everybody's been talking about. You know, I had it all in theory. I understood there was no separation, but without that actual experience, it just was an idea. And so the first time I was able to light up a person that I didn't know, was my first client, basically. It came through a friend of mine. And I remember I walked into his apartment and there were books from floor to ceiling everywhere. He was just an avid reader. And when he came back into the field, the first words out of his mouth were, "Books, what good are books?" Right? Yeah. And so that was the moment. It was like, yes, okay, you understand. You know, not everybody gets the download the first time. Some people, they have a lot of layers they have to break through. And for some people, it can be a little scary to have that full dissolve and just, you know, relax into the moment. And, you know, so you have to work with whoever you're working with. Sometimes you prep them and you just give them, you know, a little bit of medicine, and you allow them to stick their toe in. And and it's an amazing medicine, this particular one, for the nervous system. It resets the nervous system. It kind of, I call it the defragmenting of the computer of the soul, right? It puts all the pieces back together. Also,
which one are we talking about? Which one are we speaking of?
This is the 5-MeO that he asked me.
Okay.
And also, your cells have memory, and you're inhaling the God molecule, and they vibrate in that space, and they remember, and they want to be there. So for me, coming out of it, it was like, oh, I had so many revelations of, I have to take care of my body. I was on 5 or 6 medicines at the time, like medications from my, you know, regular doctor. I wasn't eating healthy. I wasn't exercising properly. I had just didn't really understand how valuable our bodies are. You know, so I got a lot of downloads that first time. And everybody, I say, has their own spiritual constitution, you know. So I've lit up people basically that have never tried a medicine or a drug a day in their life, and have had the God experience. And I've lit up people that have been working with ayahuasca and other psilocybin, MDMA, and they had layers that they had to get through. Yeah.
I found, for my first experience, I'd never known how it felt to lose the call it the agency over your brain.
Yes.
Which, if you've never had that experience, the first time you were like, okay, there's something going on here where I am not in control of whatever the train is. The train has left the station.
Yes.
And I remember I was like, it took me a moment to allow that experience, because in some ways, you know, it's happening. You don't have a choice anyways, but it was like, wow, I don't have control over myself now.
Yeah.
And that was new.
I mean, to surrender fully is a big concept to most people. You know, the brain wants to control everything, so it can feel safe. And so to actually just completely surrender and allow the experience to unfold. I call it the rocket ship to the moon. You know, when you're leaving one dimension to go into another, your brain doesn't really know the difference if you're in a rocket ship or if you're laying on the floor, if it's having the same experience, you know. So the heart will beat a little faster, and you might feel a little nauseous, but those are all normal symptoms of moving from one room into another. But if you can surrender through that space and just totally relax, then you get the mind out of the way. I call it shutting the left brain off. And once you shut it off, you can just actually be, even if it's only for a moment, 3 minutes, whatever it is. Each person is very different. But just to be without any ideas is a very freeing experience, and recalibrating again to the nervous system. To remember what that feels like, because most people are living in fight or flight. So that's why these medicines, if they're, you know, if they're ready for them, they're not for everybody. You have to, I tell all my clients, you have to get the yes in your system. If your body does not give you a clear yes, I mean, it's totally normal to be nervous and to be a little anxious. But if you are terrified and extremely fearful, I just don't recommend working with any of the psychedelics, because your mind is very powerful and you can create that kind of dynamic.
You'll amplify the thing that you're actually most anxious about. It's
Exactly.
almost like whatever I'm always saying, you know, whatever you're suppressing and resisting is going to be coming out when you're weakest, or when you're least capable of maintaining it. So
it's good. It sounds like it's good to be fully connected and embracing where you are before you take it. In a way, even doing like a meditation or a vipassana before you actually go into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some connection work.
Yeah, for sure.
What have been some of the things that, if you would like to share that, is because I'm really curious, what are some of the breakthroughs you've had in your own life through this journey?
Oh my goodness.
That's enough.
It's altered me in every way. it's been an unraveling, what I call the diamond. Everybody has a diamond in the core of their being. And we go through life and it's as if the mud and the dirt just kind of gets stacked onto your diamond. And also the conditioning of who they tell us we're supposed to be, as opposed to it coming out as a natural, organic thing from our own state of mind. So for me, that has been the great uncovering and polishing of my diamond, clearing away ideas that may have served me at one time, and were essential for my survival potentially when I was younger. But now as an adult, they just hinder my growth and they keep me from really expressing who I am and being my authentic self. So there was the Venus before 5-MeO, which was my very first medicine, and then the Venus after. And then she just continued to flower as I continued to do the work. But again, you had mentioned earlier, working with these molecules to just escape yourself is a way to do it, and I'm not negating any way, but it's really not intended for that way. All of the ancestors that have been working with these different psychedelic molecules have all said this is the journey inside to rediscover who you really are. The veil is there, the veil of forgetfulness, for a reason, but the real journey in this life is to really discover your true nature, and they give you that ability if you allow them and you allow the intelligence that's in the psilocybin or the MDA. They all have a particular vibration, and as long as you're not abusing them, right? Because with everything, these are medicines that should be revered. You should have a reverence around them. If you find yourself wanting to escape and using them, there's going to be consequence with everything, right?
What happens when you're with people that are either in the category of anxious, or in the category of probably this person is utilizing it for the wrong, because they're moving away from pain instead of wanting to go into it? How do you address those issues when you're with those people?
Yeah. So the people that are super anxious, I work with them slowly, and we create a plan that enables them to maybe first just open up the heart and remember what sweetness and goodness feels like and what that vibration is. And then we can go into deeper states again slowly as we build up a trust and they begin to feel comfortable. And that's my gift, right? I allow people to be themselves because I hold no judgment, because I've seen my own growth. I've seen my own ability. I know, we can be any character we choose. Ultimately, whichever character we feed will become our reality. Yeah. And we all desire to see the best in ourselves and to be the best. And I believe these molecules allow that ability to enhance your experience, fine-tune who you really are, and get to the diamond so that you can shine bright. And that's really important for the whole world, that we have as many healthy human beings as possible.
You want to heal the world, heal yourself first.
Exactly.
Hold Along is our favorite and very active viewer, and he has always a question on each show. So this is going to be his question, or one of his questions, I'm assuming, today. So what is the role of the person holding a hand? Are they not in a privileged position to put ideas into your mind when your mind is open to such?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I believe personally, the role of somebody who is creating a frame for people that are going into these states is to just create a safe space. I'm not in your body. You have your own GPS system. This is what I explain to all my clients. When you come to me, I'm here to teach you how to do this on your own so that you can be your own master, right? I don't want anybody on my nipple. What I want is a healthy human being who can walk away and really embody their true nature. That's, for me, the high that I get from doing this work. I also tell my clients my ideas are just that. They're just ideas, and you can either adapt them, and if they resonate and they feel good in your body, then they might work for you. But also, just having a new idea gives your mind something to do, and now it in turn can do the same, right? It can create its own new idea.
He said something that's really quite interesting, and why I think that the role that you've spoken to, it's funny, I work with people that are in foundations that are funding psychedelics. So in big foundations, some like well-known people actually that say they're funding psychedelic research for all the reasons we're discussing. And when I've discussed with this single individual, which I'll leave nameless, I had a very funny moment with him where I was like, but who is the person who's trained to help that individual go through the experience? Because in a way, he said it's that person who's going to help them integrate the experience in a way that serves them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what I'm obviously hearing you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for my process is very organic. I don't use a particular psychological format. I believe that, once again, like, you have all the answers inside of you. Nobody outside of you knows what's best for you. You have your own GPS system. When you're in these states, you can actually tune into that voice. It becomes a little more familiar. You know, you can call it whatever you want, your higher self, your God self, spirit. I mean, there are a million names for it. But really, truly, for me, it's your own inner knowing of what is best for you, how you should be walking your life, the things that you desire and you need. And so when clients come to me, I ask them, like, what is your goal here? You know, I have one client who's coming to me to prepare for his death. And he's a young man. I mean, he's in his mid to late 50s. He's not an old person, but he wants to be able to transition and be comfortable in these other states of awareness in his own being and not be afraid when that moment comes. And I thought that was a powerful, frame to put around the work that he's doing, because it enables him to just really connect with himself, as opposed to looking, I think teachers are amazing, and it's great to have a guru in your beginning stages when you're learning, but we all have our own guru inside of us. And so I think people that are doing this work, I think that's really important for them to express.
I've got something that I would like to do. Is Bambos has a hard time interrupting people to ask questions, and I know he wants to ask a question, so I'm interrupting.
She answered it. I was gonna ask you, potentially people that come to you have a question, or else you don't do it.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't say I don't do it. It depends on what their question is. I have yet to have a client who has become abusive. Do
you set an intention when they come in? Do you say everything is going to have an intention, or sometimes there is no intention before they go into an experience?
We always set an intention. That is the most important part for me. And I bring spirituality into the mix, because I believe that everything starts in that base. So basically, we say prayer over our experience and over the medicine. We have a dialogue with the molecule and the medicine. We ask the molecule what it is that we're looking to discover. But, this is the unique thing. The molecule is much smarter than we are. And most of the times people set a prayer for an experience and they get a completely different download. And, your higher self knows what's best for you ultimately. So it's really important to set the intention in going into the field, but it's also really important to relax and allow the information to come on its own without trying to manipulate it.
Yeah, of course.
Venus, can you give me like a bit of a visual? What does holding the hand actually look like? Are you giving body work, or are you just there? Like, how are you physically while the person is going through the experience?
Yeah. So most times I don't touch people unless they request it, because it can interrupt their experience. And this is a very private experience, especially with the DMT. In the other states, it's more like talk therapy. Especially with the 5-MeO, unless they request me to hold their hand or hold them, or they need me to bring them back into the room, I normally do not touch anybody. I allow them to just have their own experience. Now, yesterday I worked with a client who wanted to hold my hand the entire time, and that's all I did was hold her hand. And she felt really comfortable. It was her second experience. The first time she was terrified and couldn't really relax. And the second time she actually had the experience, but was still, it's a very big space, the God space, so some people need that. And then other people they're just super in tuned, and they just go inside and they don't need any real guidance. But if you do, that is why I'm there. So I can kind of pull you back in if you need that comforting hand or hug. Or
I held one hand on either side. And for me, that was like, it felt like just because of me, it felt like
Yeah.
an additional surrender.
I
It
love
was like,
that.
I'm going to be held in this experience, which is
That's
probably,
so beautiful.
Boas would say, it would be Andy doesn't necessarily need to touch as much. So in there, it was a far more intimate experience for me in that sense. Yeah.
I love that.
Um,
That's beautiful.
I'm interested, like, there must be shitty experiences. Like,
Oh, yeah.
what does a shitty experience look
Oh,
like?
my God.
Like, give me a real one, like something like, oh my God, that just happened.
Yeah, a few have happened in my experience over the last. I've been working with the molecules for 10, but I've been serving for almost 6 now. And some people just are not ready to surrender, and they get terrified. And I had a group of I think it was 6 or 8 people, and the very first woman who offered to go. She screamed the entire 20 minutes at the top of her lungs, like bloody murder, begging to make it stop, and I held her the whole time, and I walked her back into the room, and she finally got back into the room, and everybody else, there were a lot of new people who had never had the experience, so it must have been terrifying for them.
Who's next? Who's next?
Exactly. And I asked her, "Are you okay?" And her response was, "It was amazing. It was everything I knew it was going to be. I was just terrified, but I want to do it again." So this is the thing. When you see somebody flailing on the floor, a lot of times they're moving energy, or some people scream and they're just moving their throat chakra. And a lot of it is just moving energy. So to the outside world, it can look terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah, but inside the world, most of the time, I've only had 2 people that have really were not able to surrender at all. And you can halt the machine. You really can. You can go into a weird place, you can halt it, and you can try and make it stop. It's kind of like being on a roller coaster and trying to bring it to a complete stop. It's really difficult, but it can happen. And those psyches are just not ready to receive.
How would you stop a moving roller coaster? Like, give me an idea. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, most of the time I have them open their eyes, because you can hear me the whole time. You're never at a body where you're completely dissolved and you're not aware. So that's really important for them to know. And I explain all this prior to going in.
Yeah.
So they can hear my voice. They can listen to me while they're in state. And so then I start speaking directly to the heart. I start telling them to breathe. I sit them up. I will usually hold them, cradle them until they're kind of back in state. Usually within 1 minute to 2 minutes, they're back in body and they're starting to breathe again in a regular state of awareness. And that's the best you can do. I mean, you can't completely put it to an end. Thank God with that medicine, it's a short ride, but there is no time and space. So in eternity, it could feel like you're there for a very long time. And so I give them all that data prior to them going into state. So they're, so their conscious mind can be aware that, okay, this is what's going on. It's not, they won't make up stories around it, which is what most people do when they're out of control.
Yeah. But when you went to, you're talking about the 5-MeO, that was called the Rumi drug when I remembered what about like when someone, because with LSD, you might have the whole hallucinating and all of that experience. Is that also something that you'll be holding a hand around that process? And if so, what's the challenge that you have there with someone who's just losing it?
Yeah. So I've never had that experience, thank God. And I've never had some, because we work slowly, right? I bring them into the fields gradually. Most of the people who come to me have never worked with psychedelics before. They're blank slates, and they're also very trusting, because they come through somebody that they trust. Yeah. But the few people that I have witnessed in other groups lose it and have helped them kind of come back into the room. Somebody like LSD, you can shut the experience off with a Xanax and bring them back into the room within, a half an hour. So that is definitely a possibility. And that's really only somebody who is completely unable to function in that field and doesn't have what I call your sea legs, right?
Yeah.
You have to develop your sea legs. Not everybody's going to be good at it at the very first time. And most people that have had terrible experiences, it's because they're in the wrong set and setting. You know, the right music, the right people, the right conversations, these all enhance the experience. If you're, you know, at a festival and you're listening to something that is like screaming at you about how you hate yourself, you know, some heavy metal song or something, you're going to have a totally different experience.
You're susceptible. You're susceptible to your environment because you've just let all your guard down.
Yeah. So,
and it's kind of interesting because if you think about it, like that is life on one level, is that we're always, you know, we're not even aware, unless you watch Social Dilemma, this new documentary that came out, how much our entire environment is influencing us until we let our total guard down and allow it to come in and then have the reaction to it.
Exactly. Yeah. And also our minds are very powerful. Like I had a client come to me and she said, you know, mental illness runs in my family. Should I be doing this? Am I going to unlock my mental illness? You know? And I recommended, if you even have that idea, then don't even dabble. It's not even worth it, because you can trick your mind into believing that that is true. And then that becomes your experience. You know, my mentor and the man who taught me how to hold space, he lost his mind on LSD for a couple of years. He was put in a mental institution and he did too much and he was abusing it. Again, reverence for the molecule is everything. But he also realized in his state that he was not going to be able to get back into the 3D world without going through the portal again. And so he gave himself another high dose of LSD and he came back into the room. And now he's, you know, doing this work for 30 years. So everybody has their initiation, especially if you're going to be doing this work. That's a big part of being able to hold the space, is to go through your worst experience. I believe that, you know, spirit will take away whatever it is that you are holding on to that means the most to you, so that you can see that you're so much bigger than that thing, right? And then once you can cross that bridge, then you can really hold the space for other people to know that you're so much bigger than any story you ever tell. And, you know, we are the culmination of our stories. And it's really important to hear the dialogue that's happening in the undercurrent. And in these states of awareness, you can hear that dialogue. And a lot of people are terrified of the, you know, the heavier, the dark moments on these medicines. But again, they're showing you what's in your undercurrent. So I've learned the most about my darkness in these states. And although they were terrifying moments, they really helped me to see what, you know, what programs I'm running in that subconscious mind and whether they're serving me or not, you know, and they will do that. They will bring, you know, they will bring to the surface whatever it is that you need to deal with that is hindering you either from your growth or from your true experience of life. And one last thing I'd like to share, I'm sorry, before I cut you off. For me, the difference between a drug and a medicine, So for me, a drug makes you less of who you are, and they usually feed the ego brain. So something like a heroin or a cocaine, these things, when you do them on a consistent basis, you start to see the
deterioration.
You know, exactly. You know, but for me, psilocybin, MDMA, even ketamine is a great dissociative for people that are so connected to their story. They don't know how to separate it. You know, 5-MeO is just a great reset. But LSD, again, these are all molecules that, for people that I know that have worked with them in an honorable way, they're just better human beings for it. You know, they really have expanded in who they are.
I had a client about a month ago who was losing it, totally attached to story, attached to story to the point where I couldn't interact with them in any way that could support them. Like I was helpless because I saw can't reach them rationally, because if I try to like work through them rationally, it's almost like they'll take the rational, but then they'll shift ground in order to stay back in their hatred and anger and frustration.
So defending themselves.
Yeah. But I mean, on a level that, you know, but it was even in our interactions through the years, you've very frequently been that stubborn.
Yeah.
So he was so stubborn.
How did you put up with me?
Yeah.
He was so stubborn that I actually said, it's the first time I've ever done this in my whole career, is I said, you've got to go do some medicine, because what I know is you need a reset. And I've never told anyone to do that ever in my life. Like I would never, but I was like, wow. Like I know I had another practitioner, someone who was on this show, Joanne Lavazio. She does somatic work which is often very grounding and gets you very connected. But I even saw he was so like, I could already hear him trying to undercut anything she might do, because it would force him or allow him to stay in the story that he needed to in order to keep his narrative alive.
Yeah, that was his identity. I mean, and many people do this. You know, who am I without my pain or my, you know, backstory? And really, they're just
well at the end. So that he actually did it, and he was like, he needed that in order to break that pattern. And then he came back and he grounded, and he was in a whole nother space. So
in a month.
That's awesome.
No, it's just a weekend. He went away for a weekend and took care of it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's great.
You shared earlier that the word there's no judgment kind of vibrated in me, and like being human and everything. Like, have you ever had experience with a person who did something and it triggered your own past in a way that you're like, oh wow, I'm going to hold space for this, while at the same time trying to keep yourself together?
Oh, that's a great question. I think what I learn in every experience with every client is we're all mirrors for one another, and we're all having this human experience, and we're all going through the same exact thing, every single one of us. And this is what the story feedback, the feedback loop that I get from all of my clients, is that we're all struggling to be with our imperfect self. We're all struggling to be with our perfect self and to actually shine in that way. And when I hear these stories of, you know, a client holding on to something that happened to them in high school and they're in their 50s, you know, and that's become their identity. I remember those moments of, and we're all still digging, right? There's no getting there, but there's fine tuning, and there's recognizing that, hey, that works for me, that doesn't work for me. And so that's more of my philosophy. But sitting with a client who is, you know, sharing their story and bearing their soul to me, I am able to sit there with no judgment, because I know I too have felt that shame and that experience on so many levels. And so my empathy for that, it doesn't trigger an uncomfortable state for me, because I've been doing the work, you know, and I still have moments of being triggered. We're in the ocean of emotion, right? And so there's no perfect cure, but what there is are tools. There are great tools when you're in that moment of feeling depressed or having a wave where you're in heartbreak or there's heaviness in your body and you don't know where it's coming from, or maybe you do. Either way, like, what do I do to work my way out of that? Because living there is not conducive for the body or my psyche.
Yeah. And Bambos, what's your question?
You're such a dick.
Why?
So let's say you're having a bad day, or you've received really bad news, and you have to hold space for these people. Like, what are the steps that you might take so you don't bleed into the interaction?
Yeah, that's a good one. I usually do a little meditation, some breath work. I say a prayer, and then I listen to really good music that kind of realigns me into the frame that I need to be in. But I also, there's just, you know, something inside of me. The first time I lit a client up, I remember thinking, I was born to do this work. Like, I've been studying to do this work my whole life, literally, since I was 5 years old. So when I do go into those frames of helping other people, basically you have to leave your garbage at the door. It's not possible to bring it into the room. You know, it has to just be an open, free, clear space. But you do bring your empathy in, and you do bring your awareness. And again, it's, you know, trying to be the cleanest mirror you can be. I mean, nobody's perfect, and we all have something we're working on. But when you're in that state, just sitting back and just being the witness and not really having anything invested in their story, my investment is just getting them to enjoy the ride. Like, what does that mean for you? And a lot of us are just addicted to the chemistry, right? We're walking, talking chemical boxes. And some of these backstories create a certain chemistry in our body, even if it's not a good chemical reaction, your body's just addicted to it, right?
Yeah.
So that cortisol, when you're stressed out behind the wheel and you're driving and, you know, you're having a little bit of road rage, like your body just gets conditioned to that experience, and then it starts looking for that hit. Right. So how do we realize that that's what's happening? It's not that I'm broken and there's something wrong with me. It's more like, hey, I've conditioned myself to do this thing and it's not serving me any longer. How do I step away and create a new pattern, basically?
Random question. Do you get, because so now, like, you are going to be bringing people into the state and they're not necessarily sure who they become in some cases, depending on whatever drug they're taking. Do you ever have a problem with men or women, for that matter, coming on to you, or you having sort of advances because the people lose their own ability to manage whatever it is they might otherwise be able to manage?
I have a few times I've had what I call a blurring of the lines, where somebody just, you know, they're in love, right? They're
exactly.
really
That's my
yeah.
Like, oh my God, you're the most beautiful.
They're in that loving state, right? And so they want to just like embrace that feeling. So, you know,
You're the one.
You're the one. I've been waiting for you all my life.
God told me.
Yeah. So I just gently say, hey, that's not why we're here. And, you know, you're still in state and we can talk about that later. But I understand that you're feeling very loving right now. And, you know, you never want to make anybody feel bad for their feelings, right? Yeah. And they are real chemicals that are happening when you're in the love state. So it makes sense. You know, interesting thing. Some people want to take off their clothes and just be free, women and men. Yeah. And so, you know, to be able to just say, hey, go for it. As long as you, and this is what I say, go for it as long as you keep your boundaries up and you understand that this is your space and this is mine. And then they do, you know, and so I've never had any really weird.
Following on that, I was doing a breath work course where, you know, there was the hyperventilating where you're trying to go create altered states. Yeah. And as I was doing it, I felt so free, like the similar but a different experience. So like, I don't know if I told you about this story.
I think I've heard it, but I'm smiling.
But we were going in circle afterwards, and like I wanted to take my clothes off. Like I just wanted my clothes gone. And I was like the only man with like 6 women in the room. And I got to tell you, I mean, at some point on one level, I don't care, but I'm like, I don't want them to be uncomfortable. Like I'd be totally comfortable. You know, like who cares?
You'd be comfortable anyway doing it on the street.
I got it. But still, it was specific in that experience was that there was like such a release that everything on me felt like it was a constraint. It's like I want everything gone. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It does, because we are very constricted in how we process life. You know, it's we're not programmed to be connected to everything and everyone. And we're having this really isolated experience in our own little movie, in our own little hologram. And it, you know, so I understand completely when that happens.
There were some questions that came in from Bambos that one was,
from who?
One was said when we, earlier in the show, when you were talking about being 2 months on LSD, Melissa said you were lucky to be alive.
Yeah, I've had the 5 near death experiences during those 10 years.
Yeah.
So that was one of them.
That was one of them. And Michelle asked, did you have any revelations over those 2 months when you did that? Were there things?
Yeah, but the revelation was I had after a lot of panic, I saw a visual where I was continuing the kind of abusive behavior that I was perceiving that I was experiencing as a young boy onto myself. And I just saw, wow, this journey that I've lived doesn't make sense anymore. And when I came out of it, I had to leave the squad I was living in. Like I had to, all of a sudden I was in a raw food workshop, and there was another journey, like working out, doing different martial arts. So there was a whole path, and I had to really cut the energy lines between myself and the people I was surrounding myself back then. Yeah. And so it was like from day to night, I stepped out of it, and I didn't go to a detox center. I just stepped out of it. Like I never enjoyed drinking. I hate the taste of alcohol. And yet that was my numbing thing. Yeah.
Interesting. So in some ways, I've often thought with this experience and the one you've described. So I never took any hallucinogen till what, 48. And
He's
when
50 now.
50 now, so 2
Okay.
years, you can do
Okay.
that. And but I do feel like I'm constantly like deconstructing everything like everything around me makes no sense at all. Like I look at a world that's been constructed and I'm not projecting that this is reality because it's been constructed over a period of time. And just because everyone else has accepted it as reality. So in some weird way, I feel like I'm on LSD a lot without that psychedelic. It's more like, isn't it fascinating that people are taking this seriously?
Yeah.
And when Bambos, because he had the actual experience of living it, it's sort of curious because in some ways we have a shared experience, but mine is in a constant state of, what the fuck is this going on around us right now?
Yeah.
And how can we take this so seriously, knowing that we're on this little dot on the middle of a universe that we know, as one of guest Josh Witten says, with no known, planet that we could inhabit outside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And yet we take it so damn seriously.
Well,
So
we also had the talk show with Mr. Koenig, right?
Yeah, Peter Koenig. Yeah.
Where what we project onto money gives the value, but in fact, what we project onto everything gives the value.
Exactly.
So it's like the insight that you might have in going into a medicine experience where all of a sudden you realize that the world is just your projection of it onto everything. Like that's the potential experience one might have, for instance.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We have Reiner, who's a local. Reinier, who's asking a question.
Reinier, Amsterdam.
He says, do you hold individual group psychedelic sessions?
Yeah, I do both. I work one-on-one with clients who are looking to do deep dive work. And then I work with groups who are just looking to explore their own consciousness and create a safe space and environment just so that they have somebody who can ground them while they're on their journey. And if anybody does go into some, weird rabbit hole, there's somebody there that can bring them back into the room. So it's wonderful to do both, right? Because the one-on-one allows people to really just do a deep dive into their subconscious mind and look at all their undercurrents, or just remember who they are on the deepest level and tune into those frequencies. And then the group dynamic really allows you. I've been working with a group for 10 years. We gather every 3 months for the last 10 years. And we do a 3-day intensive working with these molecules. And it's been fascinating because you get these other energies in the room and there's other feedback loops and you get to experience how other people are perceiving the world. And again, each lens allows you to expand your lens and see.
How many people in that group don't get along with one another?
Oh, no, we all love each other. That's not even a thing. Yeah.
I was going to say, 'cause that's when the beautiful dynamic would come out. Like someone takes someone's like, hey, you're a bastard,
No, we've never. We're very, very fortunate. I mean, we've had a few characters come in and out that might have put a spotlight on some of the things that we needed to work on. But for the most part, it's like a love fest in the most platonic, sweet, loving way. You know
what I like? Just sorry, when someone comes in that's a pain in the ass, we say they help us, give us some things that we need to work on in ourselves.
Exactly.
I'm assuming when you do group sessions, you actually have assistants also, or not?
It depends on the size. It depends on the size of the group.
Okay.
And how long we've been working together.
Yeah.
And if they're very, very new, if they have their sea legs, so it really it changes.
Bolelang comes back again.
The return of Bulelang.
Yes, Venus.
Is your occupation hazardous or not? He wants a yes or no. Are you taking any risks when you hold hands? This excluding what you have discussed already.
Yeah,
absolutely. It is hazardous. You never know what you're going to open up in somebody's psyche, and that's just the way it is, right? So there has to be some form of trust. That's why we set the intention in the prayer. But there's always a piece of me that understands that somebody's psyche could be very vulnerable. And so I have to be prepared for that. Anything can happen out in the field. I just, I have never had that experience personally, potentially because I'm a feminine and because I do bring in a lot of softness and understanding. I've had clients come to me after sitting with a male who does what I do, and they weren't able to go as deep or relax as well as they were able to do with me.
I can totally understand it, because, you know, when I did my experience, I was with a man, and he was irritating the hell out of me because he kept saying, you got to do this. You got to do this. Oh, you got to do it. And like, I had already decided I was going to do it 2 hours earlier. I was sort of floating into letting it evolve. And then at some point I said, you realize the more you talk, the less likely this is going to happen.
Wow.
Like, if you don't shut up, you're taking away the effortlessness of this journey, because that masculine, like, you've got to have this experience. The masculine is always.
I don't think, well, at least in my body, when I'm going into an experience like this in my life again, it would have to do with, do I trust you? Like, are you congruent?
Yeah.
Or while I'm with you, or do I feel contractions in my body?
Yeah.
And like, ooh. And I've learned from Andy, take them seriously, but also hold them lightly and explore what that will be.
Yeah.
I like you talking with your words. That sounds so nice. Can you say that again?
Shut up.
Take them seriously and hold them lightly. That's beautiful. Sorry.
And we have Mr. Bulalang again.
He's great. He should be the interviewer half the time in our shows.
Are there people who hold hands that have an objective view of the universe? I feel in general we are subjective beings.
Interesting.
I don't get it.
He's saying, are there people that there's an assumption in, I think, Bolalang's question, is that you can have an objective rather than a subjective view of the world.
Yeah.
So there's objective view, and then there's a subjective view, and that sounds like more of we need a philosopher on to answer that question, I think. But if you want to give it a shot, Venus, please, I'm happy to.
I think, there is a universal lens when you are sitting in these frames and you're able to surrender and just really have the experience in the now. There is a universal lens that does happen to the individual who can do that. So, going into an experience with a particular lens and then having your mind blown will definitely take you into other parts of your awareness that you, for the most part, have just forgotten, right? We all have this data somewhere hidden inside of us. It's whether we're tapping into it or not. So,
but he's bringing in a point, sorry, because I'd love to touch on this.
It's okay. Yeah.
That I have not only for hallucinogens, for everything in my life, is that there is unexperience, and then that experience is what it is. And then after the fact, we give words and meaning and story to the experience, where it then becomes our subjective understanding of it. And I don't think that's only for psychedelics. I think it's really for everything we experience in the world. I mean, how many times have two people had the exact same experience and then explained it differently? So, so I think in a weird way, if you said, what is the experience? It's kind of funny. I think under the drug, an individual, each one may have a very similar experience, and yet each one would speak about that experience very differently because they integrate it in their own way, in their own language, and their own background stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I had a very funny talk with the individual I mentioned earlier who is funding research in psychedelics, and he kept bringing in the word spirituality. And I said to him, stop that word, stop that word. It may be true, but by you saying the word, you're already pre-deciding what the experience is for the other person. So I'd rather you say it's a pattern interruption where you get to experience whatever it is for you, and you can give that words instead of saying, hey, you're going to have this spiritual experience. And he was dead set on using the word spiritual all the time. Yeah. And I said, it may well be that everyone has that experience, but let them come to that conclusion on their own.
On their own.
You telling them that is what the experience is going to be. And he didn't, we actually didn't come to an agreement on it, because on some level, the individual felt that this is, should would be the right word, should be treated as if it is a spiritual experience and not an experience.
Yeah. Well, I think it really ultimately, we are mind, body, soul beings, right? And we're, a totally balanced person has all three of those ideas in alignment. they're all kind of working together. You can't just feed one and be a whole being. But I also believe that you have to speak to the audience that you're working with and use the language that they can understand. If I'm sitting with a scientist, I'm going to use more of the language that they can comprehend. If I'm sitting with somebody who really is in tune with their spirituality or the spirit in them, then that would be the language that I would use for them. And also for myself, I sit with my clients for about an hour to 2 hours, depending on what kind of dialogue they need, on the phone prior to even meeting them, so that they can ask me all the questions that they have. And I also, again, like how the masculine was like, you need this experience. I never say that to any client. I always say, you know, if you get the yes, then this is going to be great for you. But I'm not here to convince you to get a yes. Like that's not my job. My job is to give you the data, the information for then you to go out, do your own research, sit with it in your own body, and then come up with your own conclusion. And so usually by the end of the conversation, like I had one client, she said, you know, explain to me why I should be doing this. Like basically, me, you know? And then
you shouldn't. That's the answer. I did a course once where I basically didn't give it a name. And then every time anyone came and said, hey, why would I do this course? I would always say, yeah, I agree with you. Why would you do this course?
Exactly.
Yeah, I was one of the nutcases that did it.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, but 45 minutes later, she booked her appointment, you know, because she got the yes just through the resonance. And, you know, so that sometimes is all people really need. They just need the data at the end of the day so they can really just be with it.
I love Bolalong, who's going to, he says, I like the point you're making, Andy. How do you pick up that's what I'm battling in my head now, the language that we will be used when I'm there having an experience.
Bolalong, do you want to have an experience?
Yeah, Bolalong, that would be nice. I would like to hear Bolalong's experience. Bolalong, I see the challenge that people have is when they think there's truth, they always get stuck. There's that we can make a statement and we can actually say where that statement is true in a context, but that context always shifts. So there's no definite. It's people in scientific method don't like it. In fact, on a show this week, I believe, is it this week or next week? No, it's next week. We have a show on truth, and that clearly will be a show he'll enjoy.
Are we talking?
No. We have a guest on.
Oh God.
Exactly. Bambos hates anything that goes head. He's like, no, Andy, we need love. And we need
I believe God made me one day.
He doesn't like to dance in the intellectual shows.
Actually, again, that's not true.
Come on.
I'm going to surprise you.
Okay. In the past.
Stop believing.
In the past, you have not.
Get out of here.
So we've gone over our hour. Thank you for being with us. It was really great to be with you.
I hope you had fun.
Yeah. So much fun, guys. This was amazing. I hope to do it again with you soon. Thank you so much for having me.
If anyone would want to get in contact with you, how would we arrange that? Or is there a way that would make sense? Or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you that data and then probably through email. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Great being with you. Bye.
Ciao, bye.
Bambos.
Andy.
Yeah. That was that. You seem to be functioning incredibly well today, Bambos.
I've been doing a lot of breath work.
Yeah.
Like a lot of breath work.
Because compared to that other show, when you were really having a struggle, like you were fully here today. It was really, really sweet.
I've been doing a lot of breath work. I'm discovering through like in 1 minute, how many times I breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm intentionally starting to just make the breath longer and deeper.
Nice.
In my workouts, when I'm running, when I'm sitting in the ice, it just feels like the breath is really guiding me to find more relaxation. So even today where I had so much to do, I just became aware that the breath was really short. I was like, hey, stop what you're doing. Take a few deep breaths. And it just felt, in a way, that was my medicine.
Ronnie said last week when I told her that there was a show that we didn't go into it. It didn't work. She said, Andy, I'm going to make a suggestion. Why don't you and Bambos have a ritual before you start each show? Like either take deep breaths or just do some eye gazing or something. So you centered yourselves before you go on.
Ronnie, I love you.
I thought it was a really nice. I was like, Ronnie,
Ronnie, I love you.
So let's discuss the rest of the shows this week.
Tomorrow
We've got Mr. Mom, Ted
Mr.
Lowe.
Mom with Ted Lowe.
He switched roles with his wife. He's home taking care of the 2 kids while she's out earning the bacon. You also know Ted from the first book. He was the sofa I slept on when my dad kicked me out of the house. So I'm just curious how it is to live life where really you're the caretaker. And on Wednesday we have Victor Larkin shooting disease. He's a photographer that's been shooting Ebola, and he's going to be doing that. On Thursday we have Dying Out Loud with Dave Warnock.
Yeah.
Yes. We have Dave Warnock on, and Dave actually has ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and he found out he had Lou Gehrig's disease. He says, you know what, I'm doing a whole life of dying out loud, and that's what he's doing. He's just speaking about the process of dying, and we're going to have him on for Thursday's show. And
Friday we're going to have yet another sex addict.
Yeah, another sex addict. But this one, we're going to discuss his journey from becoming a sex addict to becoming a monk and then becoming an executive coach.
Love it.
Yeah. So we've got all that this week on A Wonderful Chaos, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.